culture, and sometimes look quite different. Therefore, the present version of statist nationalism is quite exclusively linguistically, culturally, and sometimes phenotypically. The culminating economic and political might put a high stake in nationalism. Consequently, along this line of thinking, minorities have become a burden and not a threat for the nation builders. While minority opinions, next frame, minorities' response, however, is prompt and strong. They are supported by some intellectuals who oppose assimilationist approach, both Han and non-Han scholars. One scholar argues that multiple cultures in China are the social capital that enables China to develop peacefully and are the cornerstone for building a harmonious society. The same author points out that such anti-minority advocates had forgotten the tragedy of Holocaust. A Mongolian professor wrote a series of 13 articles to refute the anti-minority views. Chen Jianyue, one professor from CAS, Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, wrote that such views have neglected the international practice of helping minorities and have confused the differences in nature of colonialism, majority nationalism, chauvinism, and national liberation movement. While the central government, with an untypical ambiguous attitude, reconfirmed the legitimacy of national autonomous system, it allows dissident views to be aired. However, taking history into account, the issue is not as simple as yes or no. The idea of nation-state came to China at the end of the 19th century, following the model of one nation, one state. Dr. Sun Yat-sen imagined a Han state without Manchus, without Mongols, Muslims, or Tibetans. Though he changed his view or vision after the 1911 revolution, that guaranteed the re-establishment of the Han state and took an inclusive stand toward minorities. His original idea has left an indelible mark in Chinese history, however. The Communist Party of China, CPC, supported that the Soviet model of political recognition of minorities, though a great deal of modifications have been made to it. After the founding of Communist China in 1949, the central government recognized, or rather reconfirmed, in some cases, the original so-called nationalities. They include Manchus, Mongols, Muslims, and Tibetans, but also other 50-plus national minorities. Instead of a Han state, China has now become a multinationality state, further legitimizing its vast expanse of sovereign land. Looking back at the time of pre-1911 revolution, the failure of the Qing government, or Qing dynasty as everybody knows. Okay. The Sino-Foreign wars have provided momentum for Han nationalists led by Sun Yat-sen and Zhang Taiyan, another guy, who were devoted to throwing out the Tatar captives and reviving China. So, in their imagination, China should be homogeneous and racially pure China, instead of multiple coexistence of languages and cultures, etc. But later they have changed their ideas, as I have already pointed out. Due to time limit, I just omit part of it. The multi-nationality state came as a result of great compromise. The minorities such as Mongols and Uyghurs agreed not to secede from China, and the Chinese central government rewarded them with autonomous states. So that means the autonomous system is not something granted by the central government for nothing. It's not free. It's a compromise with a lot of negotiations, sometimes even loss of life. The mainstream discourse of the national question is mostly of instrumentalist nature, disregarding history. The ideas of justice, fairness, virtue, and happiness should be added to the discourse. while the anthropological approach of engagement and subjectivity should also be included. I agree with John Rawls, who states justice denies that loss of freedom of some is made right by a greater good shared by others. It does not allow that the sacrifices imposed on a few are outweighed by the larger sum of advantages. So I prefer his idea of overlapping consensus to allow differences to coexist. Okay, I think I have to, just read the last part of it. In China's case, as far as minority issues are concerned, statism or nationalism or nationalist statism can only lead to further turmoil and increased hatred between national minorities and the national majority, who were otherwise getting along quite well in the past. They first should be treated as life forms with dignity and subjectivity. Their languages and cultures deserve high respect. National harmony should be realized unless the wishful thinking of one nation, one state, one language, one culture be abandoned. Though I am not going as far as Lee Wolf, an anthropologist, in believing that patterns of language influence those of thinking, I insist that language does have strong connections with local material and spiritual life. It deserves in every way respect from the majority. Listening to the local voices and local languages and dialects to understand the minority point of view can bring real dialogue between the minority and the majority, and can diagnose what is at stake in nationality relations, taking account of the claims of both the minority and the majority. This is a new national strategy that many leaders and officials have realized, but are hesitant to adopt and practice. Now, it is a high time. Thank you.
Now call on Professor Elena to talk. She has changed her topic of her speech after seeing the other colleagues, so she's very versatile, works with gender in post-Soviet society issues, women's political activism, and questions of reproductive health. Like Naran, Bilik has many books written and things, and we have the pleasure to work together on the International Sociological Association, of which we're both directors.
Thank you for inviting me here. It is my pleasure and honor to be part of this symposium. And I decided to talk about conservative mobilization in Russia, to talk about the thing that, civil society is not only, good human goals and development, it could be conservative, and it could be the threat for democratic development. And I would like to speak about the revival of the institution of the Orthodox Church in Russia and the alliance between the church and the state when dealing with gender issues and morality. Just to give you the short context, you probably know that the legal framework, constitutional, in Russia is such that gender equality is one of the principles of Russian constitution since very long, since the beginning of the 20th century. And then Russia ratified the Convention on Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women in 1981, and the optional protocol on violence against women in 2004. And because of that, legal acts, Russia had to adopt certain laws as part of the program. And part of the Russian elite thought that these laws of equal opportunity could be easily adopted, passed through the parliament, but it was not the case, actually, because these routine things actually launched conservative mobilization. And I want to give you the examples of conservative mobilization in the last 2 years, and the list is not full, but here you see the debate and the opposition against gender equality law, the amendments, conservative amendments to the law on health protection, or the law on abortion, the anti-gay law, for which Russia is very famous these days, the Pussy Riot case from 2012, and the ban of adoption by Americans. So there are other attempts of conservative laws and conservative mobilization, and now, for example, Russian parliament, in Russian debate, the normative family concept is discussed, and this discussion is launched by the Duma, Russian Parliament Committee on the Family, and the idea of the family is the traditional family with the traditional role division, which is called a small church, and the critique of cohabitation and partnership is also articulated by the head of the Duma Commission on Family, and there are controversies on sexual education, because conservatives claim that sexual education actually brings about the decline of morality and demographic crisis. So all these conservative talks are very loud, and I just want to look at each thesis maybe in a nutshell. This gender equality law is very simple. As I already mentioned, Russia had to pass it because it signed the international conventions. And you see on this slide the formula of this gender equality law. So the bills requires all draft laws, including the state budget to undergo gender expertise, and all government body to enforce increased representation of women in public service. But for civil organizations such as Association of Parents, committees and organizations claim that this law cannot be adopted, and they say that they are not against gender equality, but they are against the very category of gender. So they learned the lesson of the gender studies people, and I belong to these people, and so this is the quotation from the appeal to Russian Duma from February 12th. They said the category gender is actually alien to Russian language and Russian mentality because they essentialize femininity and masculinity, and through this concept of gender you can legitimize sexual minorities and moral decline of the traditional Russian society. Whose